Imagine leading innovation for giants like NASA, Comcast, and Doctors Without Borders. Today's guest on Founders Podcast, Nick Jain, is doing just that as the CEO of IdeaScale, the leading innovation software company. From growing up with humble beginnings in India to earning a Harvard MBA, Nick's journey is a remarkable story of transformation across industries, from trucking to software. Tune in as we dive into how Nick turns ideas into reality, shaping the future of business innovation. Welcome to another episode of our Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Ash, and this is a show where I interview proven founders and industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build, launch, and grow your business. So I hope you like the show. Nick, welcome to the show.
Ash, thank you so much for having me and for the kind introduction.
Great stuff. Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you would like to share with our audience?
So there was a quote that I heard when I was a kid, and it stuck with me to this day. And it is that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable man adapts the world to him. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. I always chuckle to that because it says only people who are a little bit unreasonable and crazy that actually make the world change and into a better place.
Indeed, indeed. And that gives me a lot of thought for my brain to think about, isn't it? Because actually people are a little unreasonable. They trigger the changes, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're happy with the world the way it is, you're not going to change it, right? It's only people who are unhappy or want to see change and are going to go ahead and do that.
Great stuff. Be the change, right? So tell us about Idea Scale then. What does the service product do? Who is it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
Sure. So IdeaScale's been around for 15 years now. We're in 7 countries, about 100 people. Our clients tend to be huge organizations like the US Coast Guard, US Post Office, Comcast, Pfizer. Um, and what our software does is for these large organizations, they really struggle to innovate faster. They're good at what they do, but they struggle at getting better for tomorrow. And what our software does is it helps you solve that problem by tapping into the ideas and brains of all of your broader organization. So rather than great ideas just coming from the CEO in his or her office, our software allows you to collect great ideas from your entire employee base, your entire customer base, people who care about your product or service. That could be, thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people getting all their best ideas, figuring out which ideas are good versus bad using an upvote and ranking system, very similar to a social media network, and turning those ideas into actual projects in reality. You could almost think of us as a social network for ideas.
Wow, that's interesting. So you're saying that if I'm working with an organization with 20,000 people, what your software could do is reach out to each and every node in this big, uh, you know, network, grab their ideas related to the space they're working in, and sort of like put it together in front of the decision makers.
Yeah, with 2 amendments, we're not grabbing your ideas. The users or the nodes actually have to share their ideas, right? We're not stealing stuff or data from
Sure.
their desktops or anything. They have to contribute, just like you making a post on Instagram or TikTok. And the
Mhm.
second is we're not just putting the ideas in front of the decision makers, we're putting the ideas in front of everyone. So think again, like a TikTok video gets shown to everyone. Everyone decides individually whether they like that video. They can upvote it, they can downvote it, they can click on it. So imagine doing that with ideas. And so the decision maker, the best ideas rise to the top through the wisdom of crowds rather than the arbitrary decision making of just a few senior people.
Interesting, because that actually mitigates quite a lot of v- research or design phase of any projects you want to go forward with, because then a lot of people are already giving their inputs, right, without even understanding that they're already in the process. Amazing. So let's talk about where the story began. Where did the idea for Idea Scale came from?
Sure. So IdeaScale was founded about 15 years ago by 2 folks, Viv Bhaskaran, who's a serial entrepreneur, and Rob Hohen. Rob led the company for the first 13 years until they brought me on. IdeaScale's origin comes out of a need that Rob and Viv identified, which was that there were these large government organizations that were really operating the way they did like 50 or 60 years ago. And in the United States, President Obama, when he was in office, came up with a demand that the U.S. government agencies need to get smarter and better. So this was like data.gov. There's a whole bunch of innovation happening in U.S. government, and Rob realized they can't just do this with processes and willpower alone. They need a technology to do so. So they founded
Mm.
this company about 15 years ago. And since then, we've grown both with the US government, and really we serve a lot of major US government agencies, but also the major private sector agencies now as well, because they face the same innovation challenges that large government agencies do.
Awesome. And I want to touch base upon the market and the competitors, etc. But before we go into that, can you give us a sense of the size of the business? Where are you in terms of revenue numbers or customers or size of team?
Sure. So we are about just under 100 people now. We are in 7 countries. At the beginning of this year, we were in 3 countries. We've expanded to 7, and I think I'll be in 8 by end of year. Um, the company is about $10 million in revenue, growing modestly and entirely bootstrapped, which is kind of something cool. We've never taken a dollar venture capital. We've been profitable since day one. So we are an extremely stable, growing company, which we're very proud of.
Awesome. I love bootstrap companies, especially the ones which, you know, solve real life problems, pain problems, and then could grow to that big scale, isn't it? That's really, really cool. So so I'm not sure if that's the right question for you, or maybe you had an idea when the founders had this epiphany. Did you had a chat with them? Did they look into the market? Were there other products or similar product? What was going on at that time, and what did they see from their research that encouraged them to move ahead with this idea?
Sure. So again, I wasn't the founder of IdeaScale. I wasn't around 15 years ago when they started the company, but Rob and I are close, and we've chatted about a couple of things. And I think there are 2 or 3 things that happened that made them see the opportunity. Number one was there was an actual initiative from President Obama saying, we want the government to be more innovative, and we want services and technology that helps us get there. So there was a clear, explicit demand from the market.
Mhm.
Number two was starting around the late 2000s, early 2010s, a lot of software companies started emerging that were replacing very difficult human manual processes with technology. So this was part of the broader trend of SaaS technologies taking off. Um, and number three, to answer your question about whether there were other people out there doing this, at the time, not really. It was very much a consulting, human services led business, or to try and make companies innovate or digitally transform, or strategic consulting, which is actually where I started my career. Today,
Mhm.
there's a couple of companies out there that do similar things as us, but I think we're still proud of the fact that we, serve the largest clients. We've been in business the longest, and we have the easiest to use software amongst our peer group by far.
Awesome. That's really, really good. And let's move on towards the psychology of the business. Like, why do you think, in your opinion, large organization often struggle with innovation, and how does idea scale help them overcome this hurdle? Because I have seen it firsthand myself. Big organization, they read, if somebody even has an idea, if they pitch it to their product manager or VP, it's so difficult to get a buy-in, first of all. And B, that you know uh, pushes people back who are like in the forefront of getting ideas, and picking up these pain points from the different parts of the organization to actually move it forward towards decision makers. So how does these large organization often struggle, and with this innovation part?
Sure. So I think as an organization grows and ages, 3 things happen to it. Number one is it gets more bureaucratic. There's more levels between people who are actually on the ground coming up with great ideas, the huge employee base, and the CEO of the company. So there's kind of hierarchy and bureaucracy that arrives. Number two is as an organization gets bigger and more, there's something called specialization, which happens. It gets really good at whatever it does, but as you become good at what you do, think of yourself like a factory. A factory can produce out 1,000 cars or 1,000,000 shoes, but that's all it does. It's very hard to change a shoe factory into a truck factory or into a small iPhone factory. So it's very difficult to change it. Innovation is all about change. And number three is incentives. As your organization become, when you're small, you're hungry, you're scrappy. Everyone, you have equity or you have fame or whatever that is. You're incentivized to create, to produce, to do something new, and to go out there and win. Whereas for larger organizations, the incentives for individual are look, I just don't want to be stupid. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to get fired. I'm not going to get rewarded when I do well, but I'm definitely going to get penalized when I'm going to do poorly. So it takes away the risk taking culture that is important for innovation. So those are kind of the three challenges that are consistent across any large organization, whether that is based in China, the US government, UK, a French private company. All of them struggle with these same consistent three challenges. I think where we help is at two levels. Number one, because we're enabling you to crowdsource ideas from your broader ecosystem and the ideas stand on their own merits, we cut through the bureaucracy, right? The best ideas rise to the top, whether they're from the CEO or from a junior janitor who does, sitting in a different country. The best ideas rise and they're independent of the ego or the title of the person who's sharing those ideas. Number two is because we're allowing the best ideas to be voted on and iterated on by a wider array of people, the quality of ideas improves. And number three is because it's a technology, it creates an actual process that is repeatable, right? Think of it like if you want to go to the gym. You don't just go to the gym one day and you all of a sudden are fit. You actually have to create a regime or a process. And I think any technology, whether it be us in innovation or accounting software in finance, when you have a technology in place, it creates a repeatable, iterated process. And that's really good for an organization because you want a process to do whatever you're doing. And we're obviously trying to create a process for innovation.
Mm. And ultimately, what happens is because of this, organizations save quite a ton of money, I'm guessing. Is that something in your pitches when you go and reach out to businesses?
Well, again, we have a very diverse client base, and different organizations have different goals. So, some of our government clients may be much more focused on engaging with their employees or engaging with their citizens. There's less of a profit motive there, right? Some organizations may be looking for ideas to cut costs. So, one of our Japanese customers recently used our software to figure out how do we cut costs, reduce costs in our organization without firing people. And so they came up with a lot of cool ideas on how to, reduce costs. Other organizations are thinking more on the revenue side. Let's develop a new product. One of our customers a few years ago, one of the biggest restaurant chains in the world, used our software to crowdsource on ideas on what new menu items they should have. And that was a very revenue generative thing rather than a cost reductive thing.
Interesting. Because I've never thought that you could use the same strategy to empower the organization in different ways. And you've been involved in dramatic business transformation across different sectors. What's been the most challenging transformation you have led, and what did you learn from it?
Sure. I think it would probably be here at IdeaScale. So this is the third company I've either run or co-run, ranging from, as you mentioned, trucking, men's shoes, finance, and now software. I think IdeaScale has been the most challenging, but also the most rewarding because what we do really matters to the world, but at the same time, it is less physically tangible than, let's say, a machine that reduces your plastic costs in manufacturing, or a consultant that says we're going to reduce your costs by $1 million. The value of ideas is very ambiguous until it becomes reality. And we really work on this ambiguous phase about taking ideas that as of yet don't have value put to them until they're later on. And that's a bit more of a complex discussion with customers, but the value at the end is much greater because at the end of the day, any good change in the world really started with an idea.
Interesting. I'm sure you might have also be discussing it with your stakeholders that AI might get involved into your platform or at some level at somewhere. How do you see AI playing a role in a day-to-day innovation? Can businesses leverage AI more effectively in the future, or what do you think?
Absolutely. So we're adopting AI in three different ways. One of which we implemented like a year and a half ago, and the other two which are coming out over the next few months. So the first way we adopted AI into our innovation technology was helping people write better. Because one of the really key pain points we discovered was that a lot of people have great ideas, but they have stage fright. They're afraid that, hey, I don't speak well or I don't communicate well, and if I put my great idea in stupid words, people are going to think I'm stupid, right? And this could be due to a language barrier or just a writing skills barrier. So the first version of AI that we implemented takes your great ideas as a human being and just writes them more eloquently, so you sound smarter, you sound more confident, and therefore you're much more likely to share your idea. It decreases stage fright.
Mm,
Think of it like, for our US, for your US listeners, think of it like Toastmasters, except for your ideas. The two
mm,
other forms of AI implementation that we're coming out with over the next few months are on the analytics front. So, I have a degree in mathematics. I'm very good with data, but not everyone has a advanced degree in STEM subjects, and so they may be less facile with data. So what our AI tool is doing is taking all this immense data that sits within our platform about your community, about your organization, and condenses it down into understandable analytics and understandable words that you don't need an advanced degree in mathematics to understand. So it just allows you to understand what's going on a lot more easily without doing the fancy analytics or hiring a data scientist. And then the third piece, which is also coming out in a few months, is what we call Idea Seed. This is a co-pilot where a human being and an AI tool brainstorm together. So it's a structured, iterative way for a human being to partner with an AI to iterate. Very similar to how GitHub Copilot helps developers code, or there's a version of Midjourney that allows you to do iterative work on image generation. Very similar, except our AI implementation is for you to brainstorm in real time and come up with a better mutual idea through the power of human plus AI technology.
wow, human plus AI technology. Okay. And does that leverage any kind of image or prototype or anything like that, or it's just more towards the text and words?
For us, it's mostly text and numbers at this
Mhm.
point. We have some basic AI image technology, but I don't think that's a differentiating point for us. I don't think that's something that we're extraordinary at or differentiated. And we do it well, but it's not something that I want to go brag about right now.
Okay, no problem. That's fine. And I want to learn more about you as a person. But before we jump into that, I need to know. I want to understand another thing is like what when you're working with these big organization, right? And then okay, let me rephrase the question. First, how are you generating leads for your prospective clients? And then how much effort it takes you from getting zero to sign a contract with an organization? And then two, what sort of convincing you have to do in order to sign a contract? Is it too complicated, too lengthy, or is it very short? It's product, yeah, there is a product led growth sort of things in the market, so it's product led, or it's you have a big sales team to do that. How does it all work?
Sure. So, firstly, I want to be clear that I actually spend very little of my time on sales. That way, I can be very independently focused on the technology and the education part of things. So, I intentionally try and avoid getting involved in sales conversations, because otherwise, then you get biased about your own software if you're always convincing other people to buy it. I think so. There are a bunch of questions embedded in yours, so I'll try and tackle them one at a time. Firstly, on lead generation, we're very fortunate that I think we are by far the best marketers in the innovation software space. I've got 10 times the organic SEO traffic of my next 9 competitors combined. So we are extraordinarily successful. We get a ton of inbound leads, both through organic marketing through organic SEO, as well as through offering free product demos. Our software is entirely free for any organization that's less than 100 users. So a lot of people, come try out the software for their team of 1 person, team of 10 people, and then eventually either as their organization grows or they move to a different organization, they scale up with us. So we get a fair bit of inbound leads. We do have a sales team in place that goes and executes on them. In terms of our convincing people to buy our software, I think the biggest challenge we face is what I alluded to earlier, which is the value of an idea is less obvious till the idea is later in the stage. So we have to show customers that, hey, these ideas you're collecting, you're going to collect a lot of them. Some are going to be terrible ideas, some are going to be mediocre, but you're going to get a few extraordinary ideas. And the combined portfolio of ideas that you're going to collect, harness, evaluate through our software is extremely valuable relative to the cost of buying an enterprise grade software like ours. And then third is in terms of the sales cycle. You asked, is it too long? Any CEO will say the sales cycle in B2B SaaS is too long, right? We would love if our customers signed with us on day one, but usually the education process takes anywhere from 3 to 9 months. And that's very normal in business to business software where you're dealing with a complex set of stakeholders, both on our side, on the customer side. They need IT, legal approval, financial approval, cost center approval, all that complex stuff that occurs when you are a large organization.
Indeed, indeed, and I totally get that. Starting from purchase orders, signing the contracts, governance protocols, and all these things just keep rushing into that scene. So yeah, okay, let's take a little, divergent from our conversation. Let's talk about you, right? As a Harvard MBA and a mathematics graduate, how has your academic background influenced your leadership and decision making in the business world?
Sure. So I think I have a good answer there. There's many different archetypes of leaders. You can think of the charismatic leader who leads it based on his or her own personal charisma. You can think of an empathetic leader. You can think of an operational leader. Um, Given my academic background, I was trained as a mathematician where you were always focused on figuring out the fundamental principles of how the world works and running, focusing on those principles. So I'm a very principles oriented leader. I have a sense of how a software business should run, and it's not a sense. It's a set of equations, a set of principles, a set of axioms on what makes businesses work. That's number one. So we run Idea Scale, and not just Idea Scale. In the prior business I've focused on, I've really focused on understanding how the business works, all the parts of the business, laying out those principles very clearly to everyone throughout the organization, and that's how we run the organization. The second is tying to my academic background is being very evidence-based. I'm a strong believer that if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So we try and measure everything at Idea Scale, whether that be engineering efficiency, client happiness, load times of our application. We try and measure everything because, again, if you're not measuring it, then how do you know whether you're getting better or worse? And then third is experiment-based. One of the things you learn kind of when you're studying science is you run a lot of experiments. Most of them are going to fail, but that's okay as long as you're generally headed towards the right direction. So at Idea Scale, we run a lot of experiments, and I'll give two examples. The first is on marketing. We may run like 10 or so different marketing campaigns, and we know that 9 of them or 9.5 of them are going to fail, but the half or one that does succeed, we expect to be an extraordinary success. So across the portfolio of experiments that we run, on average, they're going to be really, really successful. And that means we don't yell at anybody, we don't fire anybody when a marketing campaign fails. That's part of our creative process here to adopt and accept failure. That also applies on the product side, where we may launch 30 features, and out of them, the market tells us, hey, 25 of these are actually made you worse or are uninteresting, and so we kill those features. And that's sometimes really, it's some organizations take that as a failure of their product team or their engineering team for building a bad feature. We say no, that's part of the creative process. You do a lot of things with foresight and analysis, obviously, but the market will just eventually tell you that some of those are bad decisions, and it's okay. You shut them off with no regrets and continue with the 5 or so that did succeed.
Interesting. You have a very data focused or data backed or that kind of mindset of towards the leadership, isn't it? Because your point of view is different. I have interviewed so many founders on this show, and everyone has a different style of leadership, which is connected with their personality. So I like that because I like data backed and this style of leadership. So can you share a moment when you were faced with a tough decision that had an immense impact on your decision making or your career trajectory potentially when you joined the company, and how did you navigate it through it?
So When I joined IdeaScale, this was just over 2 years ago now. The technology industry, as you probably know, was going through a bit of a huge change, right? Venture capitalists were pulling back, Facebook and Google and Amazon were doing layoffs. Um, that's the background drop of which I when I joined IdeaScale. A lot of technology companies were struggling. We were in a fortunate position that we were doing okay. But I knew that, hey, we can't, just because we're doing okay back then doesn't mean that we will necessarily be doing well in the future. And I wanted to avoid the situation where I was one of those CEOs who had to do layoffs. So I sat down and almost immediately upon joining, made some really big changes at IdeaScale as the new guy knowing very little about the business because I wanted to future proof us. And that was really difficult because it was a lot of change happening from somebody entirely new to the organization. I was an external hire. There was a lot of pushback from folks around the organization because who is this new guy? Why are we doing all these changes when we're doing actually well? We aren't having layoffs, and why are we making changes? And that was certainly a bit of, used up a ton of political capital that I hadn't even accumulated at that point. Um, uh, and I think that was emotionally very taxing on me, because you're not well liked on day one, and you haven't built those relationships where people trust you make good decisions. Fast forwarding the clock over the past 2 years and looking to it now, I think it's ended up really well because we've grown our headcount by about 25 or 30% since I joined, whereas the average technology company, as you know, has had significant layoffs. A lot of startups have shut down. The big, the Facebooks and Metas and Amazons have all had 10 or 20% layoffs. Cisco just announced more layoffs yesterday. So did, Facebook's gone through 3 rounds now, I think. We've been very proud, and I'm very happy about that I weathered the challenges 2 years ago in order to make us a stable company today, where I don't have to have the unfortunate prospect facing me of needing to do layoffs.
Interesting. I had a founder who had similar kind of situation like you. He joined an organization, and then it wasn't as big as yours, but they were like around 50-ish people or something like that. And then exactly the same situation where you know layoffs was going on. So he actually thrown a pizza party in the office. In that pizza party, he stood like the Wolf of Wall Street movie where you have a
Yeah,
mic. He stood up like there, and he asked literally like, "Guys, I have to reduce the headcount by 25%, but I don't want to do that. I want you to give me the idea." I think what he did there on that stage is created idea scale in a physical world. You know what I mean? Like he created it there. And that's why I'm telling you this story. And one of the guys from there, from that pizza party, he said, "Boss, why do you have to fire or reduce the headcount by 25%? Why don't you just take a vertical slice? Every single person reduce their salary by 10% or 25%. That will achieve exactly same kind of like optimization in numbers when it comes to reducing the headcounts, I guess." He did that and nobody lost the job. So it just, when you're sharing your story, it got it.
one quick reaction. So that's great that they came up with an idea, and you said he did this in a physical pizza party. So that's
Yeah.
why my customers don't tend to be 15-person organizations, because they can do that. They can get up in a room of 15 people and share ideas because they all know each other. When you're
Yeah.
15,000 people, it's really hard to have a pizza party like that and share ideas as effectively and get those ideas turned into reality. That's why our customers can't innovate as faster, and that's why they call us up.
Indeed, indeed, and I totally respect that because this it's the scale which you guys track it, right?
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, great. Let's talk about the capability of the platform. Can you share a compelling case study that highlights how an organization leveraged IS scale solution to achieve success and solve their key business challenge? And I would really love to hear about a specific problem they faced and then the steps taken to implement your solution and the measurable outcomes they experienced as a result.
Sure. I actually don't I don't have access to my customers' data, and there's a couple case studies that we put out based on their permission. But I'll actually give you a very tangible example from our own use of our software that I think is really cool. So we use our own. Every organization needs to innovate. Every organization's collecting ideas. I've got 100 employees across the world speaking different languages, different cultures, different time zones. So we actually struggle with innovation ourselves, and therefore we use our own software. So if you go to ideas@ideascale.com, that's a public forum where anybody in the world can share ideas on about IdeaScale, like how do we make our software better? How do we provide better customer service, whatever. So we use our own software, and I'll use in a specific example, which is as a software company, you're always thinking about how do you make your software better? What are the new features that you need to add, or what other things do you need to remove that are bad? And all of our employees participate in our internal community. This is public, so customers can also participate, vote things up or down. And that's how our ideas are shared and created within IdeaScale. That's how we actually build our product roadmap for 2024 or 2025, or a long-term product roadmap. It's collecting the ideas of our entire ecosystem, our employees, our customers, our prospects, random students. Anyone who wants can contribute ideas to IdeaScale. And what's really cool is if you go and look at there, you can see the rankings of which ideas are voted up and down. I've submitted a bunch of ideas. Some of my ideas, even though the CEO of the company, are ranked at the bottom because the people thought they were terrible ideas. From a feature perspective, some of my ideas, I'm proud to say, are people thought were good and were upvoted. But last month, the two most popular ideas were both from junior engineers sitting on the other side of the world. And that's great to see that, like, it doesn't matter where you sit in the world, what you look like, what your seniority is, but rather the best ideas are winning. And that's how we're deciding what feature gets built.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I'm going to use IdeaScale in my SaaS too. Maybe I'll try it. Let's see what
I would
happens.
love it. Again, totally free for less than 100 people. So I would love if you used it. I use it for my private life actually too, to just keep track of random ideas I have.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm loving this conversation, Nick.
So I'm actually using it right now to brainstorm ideas for my wife's birthday gift, which is coming up in a month.
Wow, I already got it. So I can't share it though. She listens to some of my podcasts. Cool. So, we are limited of time, and I'm loving this conversation. So I want to get into the lightning round. But before that, can I please ask you one personal question? Because I think it's amazing to have you on the show. Throughout your journey and experience, right? There must have been some valuable lessons learned. If you don't mind sharing, could you reflect on your experience and tell us about one mistake or a setback that you encountered along the way, and now you consider it not exactly as a regret, but sort of like a setback? And what advice would you give our listeners based on this experience?
Sure. So I think the biggest mistake of my career that I remember was I was around 22 or 23. I was working at one of the largest private equity firms in the world. Most people at private equity firms are very analytically oriented, very logical, very smart, very hardworking, all that fun stuff. And I think I communicated really, really poorly. Somebody asked me, one of my bosses asked me what I thought about him, and I came out with both what I liked about him as what I didn't like about him, right? And I was very transparent, not saying I disliked him or anything, but I was very honest about the pros and cons. And he responded very negatively to that, saying, "Hey, it's your second conversation with me. Why would you ever list anything negative?" And I think the learning from that is, look, I'm a very extremely at the edge of logicalness. When people tell me what something they don't like about me, I don't view it as an insult. It's like, are they factually correct? If they're factually correct, I need to jot it down and fix it. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all because it's the truth. That's my North Star. I always think about what the truth is. And that mistake, hurt my relationship with that person. And it also made me realize that just because I communicate that way, I'm not very, personally offended when somebody says I'm bad at something. Most people are actually much more sensitive to what is being said about them or what is being said to them or how they're communicated to. And I think over the past decade or so, and I don't think I'm world class at this, but I'm trying to be much more cognizant of how I communicate with different people, realizing that most people do not think the same way I do or communicate the way I do, which may be offensive to them and therefore counterproductive to the goals that I'm trying to achieve in my communication.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is important. I mean, my grandfather, I've never seen him. He used to have a store in his village, and he used to sell coal and salt. And he always taught my dad that whosoever come to your store, you have to speak the language of the customer. You know, so that is something which stuck in my mind. Like, if I'm going to a bargaining deal, or somewhere where I'm speaking with somebody, I always need to understand the body language, the way the person is speaking, and all these kind of things. And then it gives me a little bit confidence. Okay, I can do that or not. You know what I mean? Like, somewhere along the lines. So yeah, yeah, I can relate to that.
Mhm.
Cool. Let's jump on our lightning round. I have got 6 quick fire questions for you, so you can answer them as quickly as possible. You ready?
Okay,
Great.
do it. Yeah.
What's what's the top 3 strategies to get ideas in your organization filter up in 2024?
The CEO asks everyone to participate. Number one. Number two, you reward people for ideas. And number three, the best ideas actually get turned into reality.
Cool. What book would you recommend to our audience, and why?
Valuation by Aswad Damodaran, who's an NYU professor of finance. It's probably the best book on how capitalism works and how businesses create value or don't for all their constituents.
Cool. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
A workhorse, someone who's willing to work an insane amount, put in every bit of effort needed to achieve success for themselves, their employees, their organization. You need to work
Awesome.
really, really hard.
Yeah, yeah, I agree to that. You will be, working hard, and then you'll be alone all the time. You feel that. Cool. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
I like something called a Pomodoro technique where you work for 20 minutes really intensely with nothing going on, no music, nothing else. You take a 5 minute break. That could be exercise, that could be a drink, going to the bathroom, and then you keep doing that. 20 minutes on, 20 minutes working, 5 minutes quick break, 20 minutes working, 5 minute quick break, and you just do that. That keeps your mind from getting bored or distracted, which people do over time.
What's the technique's name?
Pomodoro, Pomodoro. Uh,
Cool. I'm going to search for that. I like that. I do that sometimes. So yeah, I'll learn about it. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
Uh, Something in the esports industry, right? The electronic sports or video gaming industry. This is still a very underdeveloped industry relative to how many people play video games versus how many people actually play sports. There's probably a lot of cool stuff going on there. I don't know exactly what, but if I sat down and thought about it, I'm pretty sure I could develop some really cool business opportunities related to esports.
Awesome. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
So even though I'm a math guy, I actually spend a lot of my time reading novels and literature, stuff that is totally unrelated to the mathematical side of my brain. So right now, I just finished a fantasy novel with like dragons and assassins. I'm reading Paradise Lost, which is a famous a novel from the 1600s, and I'm rereading Macbeth, the Shakespearean play.
Awesome. Well, I would have thought that you keep reading mathematical books or something like that. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining me and sharing your story, unpacking a few years of business and how it originated. If people want to check out Idea Scale or they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
Sure. 3 ways to get in touch with us. Number one, you can go to www.ideascale.com. Our software, again, is totally free for anybody less than 100 users. I encourage people to go check that out. Second is you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain. I'm usually the top search result anywhere in the world. Or number three, you're welcome to email me directly at nick.jain@ideascale.com. I endeavor to respond to 100% of messages on LinkedIn as well as email.
Perfect. Awesome. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing with Idea Scale. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Ash.
Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Founders Podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Nick insightful and inspiring. Do get in touch with Nick, search him on LinkedIn, or just email him at nick.jain@ideascale.com. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on our future interviews with proven founders and industry experts. Stay inspired, stay motivated, keep building.